in the business of doing what's best for students. And Dr. Lawson Davenport and I will present to you the recommendation for our instructional plan with the theme of educate and innovate. Our focus will be on education and innovation for this instructional plan and for Suffolk Public Schools. Our plan focuses on putting the proper instruction and supports in place for all students. And this plan will solidify what our efforts for us to return to a full school environment. As you were informed last month by Dr. Davenport, our Suffolk Public Schools will now use Canvas as our learning management system. It is the online platform that all of our classes will be a part of. Because of the SPS Connect initiative, all of our students, pre-K through 12, will now have Chromebooks. Initially, it was the secondary schools, but now pre-K through 5 will also have Chromebooks, and our technology department is disseminating those to those students. Device maintenance will be maintained through our SPS technology department, as well as our school media specialists. As we are required to do by the Virginia Department of Education, attendance will be taken daily. That is a reporting requirement. However, we will discuss in our presentation what active engagement means when it comes to attendance. And so we want to be clear that as some have concerns about being online all day, that is not the case. Virtual learning is not just putting the school online. It is a very different process, and we'll delve further into that. Teachers will follow Suffolk Public Schools grading and assignment expectations. That is required. In addition, I want to mention that all instruction, whether it's synchronous, that means that we're live and the students are working with their teachers, or asynchronous, where they're actually, it's jumping on me. It's jumping. Asynchronous is when they are actually doing the work that has been assigned to them and taught to them by their teacher. Either environment, when a teacher is in Canvas, the lesson that is being presented can be recorded and will be recorded. No students will lose instruction whether they can get online at that time or not. Okay. Those lessons can be saved for up to 2 weeks following the lesson implementation. It's called the big blue button in the Canvas system, where the lesson is recorded. Students can go back to the system, use it for initial learning if they were not online at the exact time of the lesson, or for reiteration and remediation of their lesson. So they will not lose instruction because they may not have gotten on during the scheduled time. I think it's tired. Nevertheless, the show must go on. We will be using there are different interactive activities that we are creating and that our instructional content specialists and supervisors are ensuring that our activities and lessons are interactive. This is new. Education will never be the same for any of us. And so there will be great change. Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. There will be great change in everything that we do. And so we are ensuring, and we'll talk about professional learning, that our teachers and staff are equipped to provide interactive activities, project-based learning, unplugged activities, collaborative activities, and self-paced modules. Students will be able to be introduced to information and practice it at their own pace. This is not rushing or pouring education on or lessons on and expecting them to regurgitate it. Virtual learning takes a different approach, and that's what we're using. We are planning, as many of our students and parents are already familiar, we're going to be using the Google Suite for K through 12. We'll also be using iReady in the K through 5 environment, iExcel, which is another familiar platform for math K through 12, and the Virtual Virginia Content, another familiar platform for content in K through 12, and eMedia Virginia, K through 12 also, and Edgenuity, which we know we've heard your concerns about the usage of Edgenuity from the spring. There have been many conversations and improvements. That will be used as a supplement, not as a primary source. Canvas is our learning management system platform.
I know one of the major concerns of the public is the recovery of lost instruction. And so one of the things that our curriculum writers worked on this summer, as soon as school was out, actually before school was even closed, they had begun this process, was the recovery of lost instruction by spiraling skills where they fit. So the first part of that is in grades 1 through 5. We are not as concerned with kindergartners because they will be new to school in general, so they have not lost any instruction. But grades 1 through 5, the skills from 2019 and 2020 that were missed have been spiraled into our pacing guides where they fit, which means that if it was a skill, for example, that applied to math in let's say multiplication, they would have put that skill with multiplication wherever it fit into our pacing for this year. So it's not that we will go back and start the beginning of the school year with all the instruction that was supposed to be in the fourth quarter. We have placed those skills where it is appropriate and where it would be needed in order for them to move forward with 2020, 2021 instruction. For secondary, we did not stop instruction in the fourth quarter. However, we recognize that there may be some skills that students did not master that they need to master in order to move into the next level of that course. So with that, they have also spiraled those skills and put those skills that may not have been mastered in the fourth 9 weeks into the pacing guides for the next course, the next level of the course for those students. Also, all teachers will provide virtual assistance during weekly scheduled office hours. That will be real-time intervention. That will include individual students or small groups, and it will also include digital or phone communication depending upon what that student needs. One of the benefits of the big blue button is that you can do small groups, you can do individual students, you can assign individual students to certain teachers, and you can have 2 teachers working with students at the same time in that platform. So we are really looking forward to being able to provide that for our students. Assessments is also an area that we were looking at. Recently, you know that the state decided that accreditation is not necessarily going to be tied to SOLs for us this year. It has been waived. However, at the same time, we know that students have been out of school for quite a while. So one of the things that we wanted to focus on was utilizing what we call on-time skill-based common assessments. Some of these will be district-made. We have taken some of those assessments that we have typically given at the end of 9 weeks, and we have pared them down into smaller chunks. We're going to make those available, and schools will also be able to create their own assessments to gauge where their students are depending upon what they need at the time. There are some standardized assessments that are going to be dependent upon state and local guidelines. So for example, PALS, which is the test that measures the student's reading ability, that test and those guidelines are provided by the state, so we will follow those guidelines once the state releases those. At this time, that test has to be given face-to-face, so it cannot be given in a virtual setting. The same with VKRP, which is our kindergarten readiness program. College Board operates PSAT, SAT, and ACT. At this time, they are leaving it up to each locality as to if it is safe for students to return to the building. What we have determined is that the PSAT NMSQT, which is the test that 11th graders take to qualify for the National Merit Scholarship, we are going to offer that on a limited basis to 11th graders only, and we're going to provide some parameters and guidelines for how that works. We will not be providing that test in particular to the entire 10th grade class like we have in the past, primarily because we can't do that. That's just not safe, and they they only offer that test 3 times. We can only give that test 3 times in that month. They have select dates for that. So we are looking at some other ways to provide the PSAT for our 10th graders in the spring when they return to school. The SAT and ACT, like I said, is going to be based on what the local guidelines and state guidelines allow. The COGAT, which was our gifted screening, we were unable to give that to all 2nd graders this spring, so we are waiting for some state guidance on to how we can do additional gifted screening, and that hopefully will be coming in the next few weeks. And the NNAT is also our gifted test. So all of those tests do require face-to-face. They cannot be done in a virtual setting. So as of right now, we have put a lot of those tests on hold. We have actually also pushed all of our pre-testing out until November at this stage. We recognize that students have not been in school, and so we did not feel that the first thing they should do when they return in September is be pre-tested. So we will have these smaller, shorter assessments that assess their skills at a given time so that we can help instruction move forward. And then lastly, we are working with project-based assessments. We have been using project-based assessments at the elementary and middle school level for quite a few years now. Those have all moved into the virtual setting. All of the curriculum writers have moved those assessments into a virtual setting, so students will still be able to complete those assessments. We're also moving into service learning for our high school students. You know, with the recent change from community service to service learning, we'll still be moving forward with those projects. Our plan is to start the planning process with students through the virtual setting, and then hopefully when they return to school, they can do more of the outreach part of those projects.
A major concern has been with our special education and special needs populations. We want to ensure students and parents and teachers that we are making accommodations for our special needs students. Our IEP teams determine the instructional needs, accommodations, and services that can be assessed through the virtual environment. That has not changed. A plan for remote services and delivery of specially designed instruction to support with our instructional resources and manipulatives is in place. Related services, OT, PT, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy are all services that will still be in place. Specialized programs, as Dr. Rice mentioned earlier, it is the recommendation that they will return for face-to-face instruction Monday through Thursday as long as state and local guidelines allow. We do want those populations which need more face-to-face and hands-on one-on-one interactions to get the instruction that they need.
Our special populations, our English language learners, will still receive support services and accommodations from classroom teachers and ELL support staff. Those students that are enrolled in ESL classes at the high school will still be in those classes. It will be in a virtual setting. Additionally, that those students will still get whatever services they need. There is some translation available within the Canvas system, so we'll be able to provide those services for students. Additionally, our GED students, these are the students that come in to prepare for the GED part-time. We will be providing those students with Chromebooks so that they continue that online learning to prepare for the GED test, and extended instructional schedule and testing vouchers will be provided for those students whenever testing is going to resume for the GED. That is going to be set based on state and local guidelines as well. One area that we did want to make sure we mentioned was our economically disadvantaged and homeless students. So by providing all students pre-K-12 with a Chromebook, we are providing them with a device. Additionally, we will provide them with the Khajiit devices for students who do not have internet access in the home if they live in areas that have cellular service. We do know the Khajiit devices need a cell tower in order to operate. And we are working with the vendor to provide unlimited data cap on these devices, as well as purchasing additional devices, as you heard earlier, to make sure all students have them who need them. And one other thing that we are looking at, because we understand in certain parts of the southern part of the city that there is very limited access, no cell towers. So we are looking at creating resource access centers, which will allow students to come in to download or upload instruction, also to access the internet in our system. And so we are working through the logistics of setting those up. One of the things that is nice about Canvas is that it does allow us to download the material in a course in what's called an and HTML, which means that you do not have to be logged into an internet system in order to access it. So students will still be able to see some of the material that is available. There are some limits, of course. You can't run streaming and live video, but students will be able to access some of that material as well. And then hopefully sometime during the week when they can get to Wi-Fi, they will be able to upload and go into some of those live sessions and things that they may need access to. Our special programs, dual enrollment, will follow Paul DeCamp Community College guidelines. They already utilize the Canvas system, so many of our classroom teachers who are also Paul DeCamp instructors are familiar with that system. However, we have gotten approval from Paul DeCamp so that our students who are in our teachers' classrooms that are Paul DeCamp instructors will be able to use our Canvas system and not the community college system. So that will allow those students to not have to move between two different instances of Canvas. They'll be able to stay in the one. The College and Career Academy at Prudence, which is CCAP, International Baccalaureate, and Project Lead the Way programs will all have virtual learning for the first 9 weeks. We have worked with providing those students with as much as we can as far as what they can do virtually in hopes that they can return to start doing more hands-on activities after the first 9 weeks. And the Governor's School for the Arts has determined that regionally they are going to go to 100% virtual for the first 9 weeks. They only ask that we protect the time available for their students to attend that they would ordinarily be on the bus. They are asking we protect that time and not have our instruction counter that time. So that's why when we get to the schedule, you will see the importance of the schedule so we can make sure students will have access to all of the programs and things that they normally would if they were coming to school every day. In our electives and resource courses, we are working very hard to make sure that these students can still participate in all of these other activities that they would in a regular school day. So these synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities will occur each week. You can see in the picture there would be a teacher in the building conducting a lab live for students so that students could record the data as the teacher would give it to them. So the students could literally be at home recording data as the teacher does a live lab and they can see that lab being conducted. They'll also receive some hands-on activity kits and materials to supplement the online learning. Some of these things could be anything from a jump rope to do things or a pedometer in order to do PE or count their steps to smaller kits like were provided in the summer, and I'm going to show you some examples of those. Also, we will be utilizing virtual labs. Edgenuity does have a very robust lab system. It's a lab simulator that allows students to change different parts of the labs in order to get different data. And so we will be working with Edgenuity in that system to create modules for teachers to be able to utilize with students. And this is just an example from our virtual LEAP program this summer. If you can see in the picture, there was an activity in which students had to actually create a Band-Aid. It was a branding and marketing, and they had to create a Band-Aid for a specific purpose and then create the actual brand. So it couldn't be a Band-Aid brand. So you can see, for example, in the first picture, that's an alien Band-Aid, so it's alien AIDS. And then they had certain materials they were given to create the Band-Aids, and then they took pictures of the Band-Aids and how they worked and how they would protect a person who had an injury. And these were from this summer. So the professional learning that we are going to provide for our teachers has already begun. The first one, of course, is making sure all of our teachers are familiar with Canvas. We started with a small cohort in the first group, that was cohort 1, and they actually went through the course the end of July to the beginning of August. And because of that, they were able to access their sandbox, which is where they can kind of play with creating a course. And these are self-paced modules. They also are provided Tier 1 support, and there's also an online learning community, and there are quite a few Facebook pages that teachers have started with providing tips, and there's a lot of information out on Twitter. So teachers have actually jumped right in to start creating some of the materials that they will use in the fall. We'll also be providing them with some virtual learning best practices. We're actually going to create our own homegrown course for that, and that's going to be created by our content supervisors to help give them guidance in each subject area so that they are aware of what the best practices are for that content area. Of course, we require all our teachers to have Google Level 1 certification, and that started back in March, so we are continuing with that. Canvas is fully integrated with Google, so making sure that all of our teachers know how to use all of the Google suite is really important with making sure that Canvas works appropriately. Some supplemental resources we will be providing for K-5 math and reading is iReady, and I'm sure you've heard the reports before in the spring about iReady being used. It was used this summer, and students really seem to enjoy that. We'll also be providing some culturally responsive instruction through our PD that would be provided when teachers return, and we have Zaretta Hammond who will be coming in and working with us to provide that for our teachers. And we'll also have a social emotional learning component that teachers will receive training on to be able to provide to students. One of the key findings from the state task force was we needed to focus on what students were going to need emotionally after being out of school and away from their friends for so long. So we thought it was really important that we included that in the instructional day when you see our schedule, that we built that in so that students had that every day.
We realize this is new for everyone, and because it's new, we have to ensure that there are expectations from all stakeholders. There are administrator expectations. All administrators, building level administrators and their instructional teams, as well as content supervisors and some SAO staff, will have observer and monitor status in all virtual learning environments. Dr. Gordon will also have this level of access in all of our virtual learning platforms. This will allow administrators to go into a classroom virtually and ensure that learning and teaching is taking place. All teachers will have will receive feedback from their administrators as well as others on some best practices or things that they can do to improve or change some lessons around for student learning. This is very important that administrators are able to get into the classrooms. In the spring, there were some complaints that there was no responsiveness from teachers, and parents were contacting administrators regarding their questions or their child not receiving feedback from their instructor. This is another way to ensure that everyone is working and working collaboratively for the best interests of our students. Administrators also have to ensure lesson plan alignment and pacing when they go in to observe. The lesson should be aligned with what the lesson plan says, along with the pacing guides that have been created. Administrators should also respond within 48 hours to parent inquiries. This is very important. We want to ensure that there is a line of communication between parents and administrators and teachers as well. And that's actually a standard within the division, that we all respond to any communication within 24 to 48 hours. Communicate updates to parents and students, and confirm and update student contact information. We want to ensure that when we're in this virtual environment that we are communicating with the right people. And it's important that parents update information in the system so that we can best connect with you and your student. And track and monitor student attendance. There are also teacher expectations, and I'm going to break this up into two parts. It is our recommendation that teachers work from their buildings daily, Monday through Thursday, with Fridays being optional for school attendance. However, although Fridays may be optional, teachers will still have to connect with students, provide small group or one-on-one instruction and remediation. There may be professional learning opportunities or professional development on those Fridays. So it will not be a day off. It will not be a day off for students because of the attendance requirements, as well as for teachers. This is important, as Dr. Gordon mentioned in his response. We can best assist our teachers and students when they are in the buildings, because we can provide not only the technological resources and bandwidth, but any additional support that they may need. Also, all of their resources for labs. You saw Ms. Leitner in the picture doing a lab on video for her students, and the students were working on the other end. That cannot happen from the home. All the resources are in the buildings, and we want to ensure that our students are getting our very best every day, and not just one day or when someone feels it's best for them to communicate with their students. But our students deserve our very best every day. The proposed teacher hours are 8:15 to 3:20 p.m., and you're going to see our schedule, the proposed schedule. Itinerant teachers, those who would normally go between buildings, will remain at their home-based building for virtual instruction.
So what you see in front of you now is our suggested schedule. We could make some modifications to this prior to the beginning of the school year, but this is really what we feel would be in the best interest of students. And I want to start with the caveat that the instructional schedule does not mean that students will be sitting in front of a computer from 8:30 to 3 o'clock. We recognize that that is just not feasible, nor is it in the best interest of students. But what we have set up for teachers and for students is some continuity and some consistency that will allow parents to plan, that will allow students to get into a routine, and that will also allow our teachers to be able to best accommodate and schedule for the needs of all their students. So you can see at the beginning of each day, we start with the social emotional session. 15 minutes will be dedicated to that, and that will be the curriculum that is provided through that social emotional program. After that, students will go into what is known as core integrated instruction at the elementary level. This may be synchronous or asynchronous. So what that means is that we will be looking at integrating core subjects. So the lesson may be a science and math lesson combined. We may cover two skills at the same time. It may be social studies and English. So you may be reading a social studies text to cover social studies standards. So we're working on making sure that we focus on literacy and numeracy as key components, but also include all the other core areas as well. The resource class schedules will be set by the school. If you notice, it says alternating days. There is space built into this schedule for individual buildings to create the schedule that works best for their teachers. So while we provide them with a rough schedule, resource class, they could determine that it would be best for PE to go on Mondays. So the PE teacher may have access to 3rd grade during that time on Mondays. Maybe on Tuesday, that would be the 5th grade have access to PE. It would just depend on how the building chose to break that time up. At the end of the day, it was important for us to provide the remediation and small group enrichment at that 1:25 to 2:10 period, but we also wanted to make sure that from 2:15 to 3:05, we allowed time for gifted resource, talented music and art to meet, and any other enrichment that students might need. So we didn't want to only focus on remediation. We wanted to make sure that all of the programs that students would be able to access in the school, they would still have access to outside of the school. And so one of the things that's important to recognize with this schedule, and that guidance from the state has come down, is that they do not recommend that students sit in a virtual session at the elementary level for longer than 20 minutes. So while you see an extended amount of time available, that lesson may only last 20 minutes. What this schedule allows parents to do is say, I know from 8:50 to 10 o'clock, if my child is available, I will be able to get some live instruction depending upon what day of the week it is. So it will be upon the buildings to set that schedule. So if they say, for example, 3rd grade will have virtual live sessions every Monday and Wednesday, and then they will have asynchronous learning on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. They will communicate that to the parents of that building. So we've built in some flexibility for each building to kind of create the schedule that works best for them. The middle school schedule, this is for grades 6 and 7. They will also begin each morning with social emotional session. That'll be 15 minutes. It's built into that first block. They will also have dedicated remediation time each day as well. They are on a block schedule, so it looks a little different. And one of the things that we had to make sure we provided in all the schedules was a morning brain break, so students aren't sitting all day. We also wanted to make sure we provided lunch. Since we will still be providing lunch through the neighborhoods, we wanted to make sure students had an opportunity to leave and go get lunch if they wanted to during those times. And then, of course, we have the enrichment and support for the periods at the end of the day in middle school. Middle school has exploratory blocks that are shared amongst all 3 levels, so we had to make sure that we provided time for students to get that exploratory during their certain blocks. And just like the other ones, we wanted to make sure that buildings still had a little flexibility in how they scheduled those enrichment and support periods. The last schedule is the high school in grade 8, which does an odd-even schedule. One of the things that we did hear from Edgenuity was that because students were doing all 7 classes all day, it was a long day for them. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure we provided was to make sure that the odd-even schedule kind of stayed the same, so students only need to work in 4 classes each day, as opposed to doing 7 classes a day. I can tell you that if you choose the hybrid model, they would go to all 7 classes all day. So they would see all their teachers every day. But in the virtual model, we think it's important that they do an odd-even schedule. So first block, just like it is now, is every day, and then the other periods alternate. The purpose of this is twofold. One, we need to make sure that students and teachers don't overlap each other. So in the fall, there were often times where, and I have a student in high school, that he could have a math teacher having a live session at the same time as his English teacher because they don't know that they are sharing a student. So by creating a schedule, it allows the teachers to know what time they're seeing which students. It allows the students to be able to schedule and plan. If I know that a student is weak in math, for example, as a parent, I'm going to ensure that they are logging in during the math block when those virtual sessions happen. Additionally, like I mentioned earlier, Governor's School for the Arts students will still have their own live virtual sessions from 2 to 5, so it was also important that we provided time built in for them to attend those classes and to know when their regular core day classes were allowed. And of course, the high school students also have a morning brain break and a lunch provided as well. But I want to reiterate that this schedule in no way says that a student should be online for 45 minutes. We have provided a wide range of time so that a teacher could log in for 25 minutes and say, we're going to do a quick lab, and then I'm going to let you go, and you can go and do what you need to do and finish the lab out and then submit it virtually. It also allows, for example, at the elementary level, for a teacher to do one-on-one sessions at a live session. They may say reading group A is going to meet today, reading group B will meet tomorrow. All of those schedules will be communicated to parents based on each local school.
I mentioned that teacher expectations would be broken up. These are additional expectations that we have a new instructional innovation plan for all instructional planning, which includes the 5 C's for the profile of a Virginia graduate. It includes how you're going to embed social emotional learning. It includes activities, and this doesn't have to be a daily lesson plan. Dr. Gordon has allowed for a maximum. It could cover 3 weeks where you're covering content over that time frame. But this instructional innovation plan will be used by all teachers in the 2021 school year. They do need to create synchronous and asynchronous schedules. It is imperative that our students and parents understand when there will be synchronous instruction. In Canvas, when an assignment is created, it goes to the Canvas calendar so that it identifies all due dates for assignments. It also indicates when class will be held. And so if you don't get in on the first iteration of the class, you can see the recording. All of that will be placed in Canvas when the teacher sets up the schedule. Teachers are expected to do small group, whole group, and one-on-one instruction throughout the week. And again, the calendar is will be posted in Canvas. We'd like to demonstrate to you some of the classes that have been created in Canvas already with teachers who are working.
So this is a screenshot of a kindergarten teacher who's currently working in the summer program, but she also went through the first cohort of the Growing with Canvas course, which is the PD we're providing to teachers. And with that, she created this setup in her sandbox. This is where she can easily import the information and material she puts in her sandbox into her course when it is ready and schedules have been set for the year. So with this, you can see the idea with kindergarten, and the same with pre-K, is not that they will have to navigate and read a bunch of next buttons and, moving forward and that kind of thing. She's created a one-stop shop. So in her picture, if you notice, for example, she's brought her calendar time, which is typical in kindergarten, to the front page of her Canvas page. So in September, a student would click on September, then they would have a calendar that looked like a calendar that might be printed on the wall, and they would click on the 8th, which would be the first day of school, and it would take them immediately to all the work that they would need to do on the 8th. So students would not have to navigate beyond a bunch of different sites in the kindergarten stage. One of the other things that she has placed up here, if you notice at the bottom, all of those extra digital tools that she has used, such as iReady, iExcel, well. Seesaw, which is very popular with the lower grades, and other things that her students may be familiar with. She's provided all those links right at the bottom. So if a parent says, let's go practice math, they can just click on IXL and the students will be able to do that. Additionally, she has a Meet the Teacher link, which will take them to her website, and for parents, which could link directly to a Google site created by the entire kindergarten team that would give them information on supplies, due dates, or anything that they may want to share as a team in that building. And so what is important to recognize here is this is her creation. This is very flexible, but what we are hoping to be able to create for teachers in our curriculum writing this month would be templates that teachers could easily link their activities directly into this. So they would just have to change maybe the name or the header at the top, and this would be available for them to be able to use immediately. This is an example of a 4th grade page, which, you know, it looks not quite as pretty because this is an upper level, but it also includes the buttons. It also includes links to things like library and coding if you want to check out a digital book. So teachers can provide all this material for students at one stop. It doesn't necessarily have to look like what you would see in a typical Canvas course. And then this is an example of a high school teacher's page. This is Miss Lyles at Nansemond River High School. She has set up what actually looks like her classroom. She has window panes painted on her classroom in her real room. So she was excited to be able to set this up. But you notice there she has a link to course info, which would take them to a course syllabus, and then this week's work. So students could click there. She would have a link directly to what they need to work on for the entire week. And it may also tell them what days she'll be live with them, what days they have things due, when their tests and quizzes are due, and those types of information. So one of the things that we did do with this first cohort, and I wanted to share some of this data with you, is we got feedback from this first group. We had a very small cohort in the first group, and they were teachers who had already written curriculum and were familiar with what was going to be included in the pacing for this year. And they went through the course first to provide us with feedback as to things that we might need to tweak to make sure that we were providing teachers with what they needed. So the first part was, of course, this course prepared me to begin to set up my class in Canvas, a 1 being disagree and a 5 being strongly agree. So you can see the majority of teachers felt like after the course they had a better idea of what they needed to do and how to start setting up their course in Canvas. One of the other things we wanted to be mindful of is how long the course was. They felt the course was adequate in length. It is self-paced, so we are providing teachers. We tell them it takes about 15 to 20 hours, and part of that extra hours, the modules do not last that long, is what you saw previously. Teachers going into their sandbox and creating things, so we wanted to build in hours for them to be able to start playing with and creating modules for the fall. Some of the feedback, because we did allow them to put some feedback in there, was, and elementary is the focus here because we know that this is going to be the most different for elementary. Middle and high have done virtual learning before, so they are a little more comfortable with using platforms like Google Classroom. But elementary, particularly our younger grade levels, the teachers were a little more apprehensive. But some of the things that they gave feedback on as far as the Canvas Growing with Canvas course, they thought the course covered everything that was important. They thought it was a great platform, a one-stop shop. Another student thought it was great from a student perspective, from the learner. They feel equipped and prepared to use the tool. They do fear that other staff may feel a little different. They also, the last teacher there mentioned discussions can be differentiated. They like that groups can still collaborate on topics, projects, tasks, etc. They see it very helpful for secondary students, and they also like that teachers could assign group leaders to collaborative projects for students. So there's a lot of great features within Canvas. One of the things that we did also note was that they felt that more training in Canvas was needed before they can be prepared to support students. So we are working to make sure, like I mentioned before, those best practices in Canvas, that's what our curriculum team is working on now, to create that course for teachers so when they do come back, they can get additional training on all of the features in Canvas so that they will feel prepared by the time school starts in order to utilize it.
Again, just focusing on the expectations, we want to ensure that you and parents understand that we are putting students first. This is a student-centered approach to our instructional plan. We want to ensure that that teachers maintain accurate communication logs with parents and students. That is a requirement. They will have to write and keep a log of their communication with parents to ensure that they're following up and there's feedback there. Daily office hours will be presented to students and parents. Grades will be submitted, as we spoke on earlier, according to policy. Daily attendance, that's required of us, but daily attendance does not mean a student is marked absent because they didn't log on that day, because this is more about active engagement. When a student is not logging on or there's no contact, no feedback, a teacher needs to reach out to that student to find out what's going on. Maybe they didn't have access to the internet that day, and they may be going to a resource access center on Friday to download all of their material. That student is working, however, they didn't get on at the synchronous time, no problem. Active engagement will be the focus for attendance, not just being online. Recording synchronous instruction for student playback is an expectation because, as I mentioned earlier, all lessons can be recorded in Canvas, not in Google, but in Canvas, the platform that we are using, and it can be saved up to 2 weeks for playback and remediation. And we are asking, and we're expecting our paraprofessionals, our teacher assistants, to continue to support students with small group and one-on-one remediation. And so teachers are expected to plan with paraprofessionals so that they can assist with supporting those students. Teacher assistants will also go through training on Canvas so that they can get in and support students. Parents are not left off the hook in this process. We do have expectations for parents as well. And we want them to sign up for Home Access Center so that they can check in and see what their student is doing. Log into the Canvas class. There will be a tutorial training for parents in Canvas so that they know what to look for, know how to navigate. We want them to sign up for School Messenger and, again, Canvas to monitor their student progress. We want them to help establish routines and procedures in the home with some type of structure. We realize that students may play games all night and sleep half the morning, but there should be some type of established routine and schedule so that the student is online or doing their work as expected. Provide a designated workspace. It might not be best for them to be on their bed while they're doing their assignments. Encourage regular brain breaks, which in the proposed schedule, we have built some of those in. We want them to communicate frequently with teachers and staff to ensure there's an open communication and that we are expressing on both ends what's best for students. And ask the student questions, ask them what they've learned so that you as a parent can ensure that they are progressing. And students, we expect students to monitor assignment due dates using Canvas. Again, there is a calendar built in every time there's an assignment, synchronous learning, that will be in the Canvas calendar so students can keep up. You can no longer say, I didn't know, because it's in there. We also want them to sign up for Remind and Class Dojo and other systems that are used to help them remember different things. Display academic integrity in all assignments, quizzes, and tests. Actively engage and participate in online courses. We don't want this to just be a virtual experience and you're just doing what you need to do. But the lessons and activities that are going to be created and that students will be involved in will be very engaging. So we want them to be active participators. Take regular breaks. Establish a routine for completing their work and communicate their needs frequently to teachers and staff. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Rice. That's it.
All right, so thank you to the team that came up here and presented to you this evening. As you could